Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jeremy, and thank you for tuning in to the JP Tactical Gear channel. Today, I would like to welcome you to the first episode of a segment I will be calling Introduction to Firearms. This series of videos I'm putting together with the intent of providing a basic level of understanding for new and inexperienced firearm owners. So for today's episode, we're going to be starting off with one of the most crucial things to understand as a new firearm owner, and of course, that is the 4 firearm safety rules. So stick around and let's check this out. All right, so for the first rule of the 4 firearm safety rules, this is very, very simple. We are going to treat all firearms as if they are loaded. Now this comes back to all those silly stories you've probably heard over the years of someone blowing a hole in their ceiling because they were cleaning the gun and didn't know it was loaded, or something along those lines. This is very, very, very simple. You simply treat every gun as if it's loaded. Rather that's a gun that's in your safe that you're pretty sure you unloaded before you put it away, or that's a gun that's foreign to you in a public environment that you feel you need to secure for the safety of yourself and those around you, you will always treat the firearm as if it's loaded. These are not toys. This is where a lot of people get hurt. They pick up an unloaded gun, so they think, and they point it at their buddy, ha 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 ha, bang! And they accidentally shoot their buddy in the chest. I have a personal story about this. I had a friend of mine who had purchased a brand new Glock. He had never owned a handgun before or a firearm before, and he purchased a 9mm Glock 17. And he was very, very excited to have this gun. So I took him out to the range. I taught him how to shoot, gave him a good once over to make sure he was safe, including teaching him these 4 rules. But he did not follow these 4 rules. Later that afternoon, when we went back to the house and I showed him how to take the gun apart and clean it, he created one of the largest faux pas that you can do with a Glock. We took the gun apart after he mastered being able to cock the slide slightly, pull down your takedown lever or block, and take the slide off. He got used to that and did repetition after repetition to where he could take it apart smoothly. Not that important, but I let him play because he wanted to get used to it. Later that evening, he must have stuck a magazine in the gun and chambered the gun and put it in his box because he, on a whim, said, I want to see if I can take that slide off. He picked up the gun, pressed down, pulled back, the slide didn't come off. He said, oh, that's right, I need to pull the trigger. He grabbed the gun, pulled the trigger, and bang! Killed his living room floor. Now, why did that happen? Because he did not treat the gun as if it was loaded. Luckily, some of the other rules we'll be talking about in just a moment saved his bacon. So let's go ahead and move along. Now, piggybacking off of that story where my buddy decided not to treat the firearm as if it was loaded and assumed the gun was unloaded, where he should have checked the chamber first, he said, nah, it's not loaded, bang, and blasted a hole in his floor. The rule that saved him was rule number 2. Don't point firearms at anything you do not want to destroy. Now the round that came out of that 9mm Glock luckily went right between his feet and slammed into his carpet, and I have no idea how this happened, but that man was very, very lucky that none of those lead particles from the bullet hitting the concrete splayed out into his feet because he was not wearing shoes or socks when this happened. So luckily, he was not pointing the firearm at anything he did not wish to destroy. Now, one thing I like to talk about when it comes to not pointing the firearm at anything is a rule I like to call the 3-2-1 rule. In short, when handling firearms, there's usually going to be 3 options for your muzzle direction, whether that be up, forward, or down. 2 of those options are normally acceptable, one of which is not. The easiest way I can make this example is if you're in a boat. If you're in a boat with a firearm, pointing the gun up is probably acceptable. Pointing the gun forward may even be acceptable. Pointing the gun down is absolutely not acceptable. So on and so forth. You can actually make the opposite of that argument in the case of a helicopter. Pointing the gun up is not acceptable. Pointing the gun out the bay door may be acceptable. Pointing the gun down is probably your best option. So you normally have 3 options, 2 of which are acceptable, 1 of which is not. That's the 3-2-1 rule. Now, Moving along to our third rule, that is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are already on your target. And this is something I've seen time and time again when I worked on active ranges where you had both training scenarios as well as public shooters. And one of the hardest things to drill through a new firearm owner's skull, because they're usually pretty thick. We've all seen action movies and we know what we're doing, right, gentlemen? Wrong. One of the hardest things to drill through a new firearm owner is trigger finger management. Your booger hook does not go on the bang switch until your sights are already on your target. Now again, this is a broad stroke statement. Of course, as you become more and more competent with firearms, especially when it comes to self-defense training, you will learn how to fire from retention, so on and so forth. I would argue that your sights will technically be oriented at the target, but not in the way that a novice will have lined their sights up. So for a new firearm owner, and even most experienced firearm owners, your finger does not go on the trigger until your sights are on the target. Very simple. Last, but not least, is one of the easiest rules to follow, and this is always be aware of your target and what is beyond that target. There was a story that I heard when I took a pistol instructor course. This was an NRA certification course, and this was a real story that actually occurred that my instructor had pulled for this portion of the class. There was a gentleman who was very handy, good old DIY kind of guy, right, gents? Because we do it on our own. I'm not paying someone to do it. And he was running a TV cable line through his wall to put a TV in the kitchen for his wife. And instead of going down to the store and spending all the money on a heavy-duty drill to punch through the stucco of his building, he said, "Hey, I've got a handgun." Do you see where we're going here? This gentleman decided to take his .45 caliber handgun, crawl on the side of his house on his hands and knees, line up the handgun with about where he wanted to punch the hole in the wall, and sure enough, bang, fired a hole in the wall. What he didn't understand is that the projectile traveled through the wall, glanced off of his concrete floor, and smacked his wife in the chest. I do believe she survived. Don't quote me on it, she might not have survived, but in any case, this is not where you want to end up, folks. As a new or even experienced firearm owner, everything that happened in that story was unacceptable because not only did he break multiple of the firearm rules, as well as some basic common sense, he broke the fourth rule. And the fourth rule was always know what's beyond your target. This is also something that occurs regular in hunting scenarios. This is the classic, I saw a deer in the woods, I fired at the deer, we picked up the deer, and while we were gutting the deer out, we heard screaming from down the way. We walked around the corner, and sure enough, there's a pickup truck, and my bullet went right into some random dude's engine bay. Or, worse, some random dude. So, always be aware of your target and what's beyond it. You want to have a proper backstop to catch that projectile at all possible. Now, if you cannot verify the backdrop behind your target, is it worth taking the risk? No, it's not worth taking the risk because you as a firearm owner are responsible for every single projectile you fire. Every one of them bad little boys has a lawyer attached to the ass end of it, and that's on you. So, always be aware of your target and what's beyond it. Now, this isn't part of the rules. This is something I would like to kind of tack on as an honorable mention with my 12 plus years of experience in the firearm industry. And that is, bullets do weird things. I've seen bullets do things they're not supposed to do. I've seen bullets do things that made absolutely zero sense. I have found bullets on the range, in areas of the range that they technically should never have ended up because bullets sometimes do weird things. In one example, I was running a machine gun shoot with a .50 caliber Browning machine gun, firing 660 grain steel core American Eagle ammunition at a series of taxi cabs that were decommissioned. They were targets. After that shoot was complete and I went downrange to pick up some of the garbage and clean the range up, I was very, very surprised to find those steel core 50 BMG projectiles lodged and stopped in the windshield struts of those taxi cabs. Now, of course, windshield struts are designed to hold the entire weight of a car. So if you flip a car, those struts themselves keep it from crushing you. But for a 50 BMG steel core projectile fired at probably about 90 to 120 yards to stop in that strut does not make sense. I have also seen an individual accidentally, well, let's call it what it is, negligently, discharge an AK-47 inside of a building. Once again, he didn't think the gun was loaded. The bullet passed through a hollow core door and lodged into a 5-gallon bucket. Now we can get into the weeds about the gas system on the AK, causing the bullet not to have enough pressure behind it, but long story short, within about a 10 feet distance, there is no way that bullet should have stopped in an empty 5-gallon bucket. So bullets do weird things. I have personally been hit by ricochets off of steel plates with springs that were set at an angle. Things happen. Bullets are dangerous. You have a small mechanical device that you are holding in your hand that houses an explosion and sends a piece of lead and metal down a tube at very high velocities. And what happens after that point does not always go as you think. So, not only do you need to follow the 4 firearm safety rules, but I also highly recommend that you use one of the best things that us human beings are built with, and that's common sense. If you have a moment of, I don't think this is a good idea, don't do it. Because that ride to the hospital, or worst case, the mortuary, is not going to be worth the afternoon of having a good time. It's not going to be worth it. It's like I say about buying reloads. And again, just another honorable mention for new firearm owners. I don't buy or shoot reloads. You know why I don't buy or shoot reloads? Because guns do weird things sometimes and mistakes do happen. And if that reload is accidentally overcharged and blows up in your gun, the couple bucks you saved on that bag of bullets isn't going to be enough to pay the surgeon to sew your fingers back on your hand, okay? So always use common sense and always follow your 4 basic firearm safety rules. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into the JP Tactical Gear channel, more specifically the Introduction to Firearms series. I will have more of these videos coming out. If you would like to support the channel, blah, 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 hit the like button, comment down below. But if you really want to help us out, go to jptacticalgear.com and pick yourself up some nylon goods. All of our nylon products are designed and manufactured by me right here in the United States in good old Las Vegas, Nevada, and we'll be happy to set you up with anything you need. Thanks again, folks. Out.